Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. And today I am doing a super exciting video because I am going to be talking about the books that I absolutely loved in 2022. And actually the day that I'm filming this is the 1st of January, the 1st of 2023. So I feel like this is a super fitting video to make, and I'm so excited to talk about these books. Honestly, I have really labored over which books to include on this list, which books that I really want to talk about, because I read 115 books this year, which is unheard of for me. I typically try to go at least to 50 books every year, if not a little bit more, but I've never gotten over 100 books read in one year, and I'm just really proud of myself. I worked really hard to do that, and it was not easy, I will say that, but I am super proud of myself for getting to that number. I don't know if I'm going to do it next year, but we'll see what ends up happening. I'm just going to try to reach 50 and then we'll go from there. But this year, I think I did a really great job, and I read so many good books, so it was definitely really hard to narrow them down. So I was thinking that we could kind of break this up into two separate sections. The first section where I talk about the books that I physically own, and then the second section where I talk about the books that I don't physically own. Out of all of my favorite books, I actually read quite a few of them from my physical TBR, which I'm very proud of myself, and I think that that goes to show that I should probably pick from my physical TBR more often, because I should trust myself and my taste. I know what I like, and typically the books that I buy I tend to absolutely love. So I want to get right on into this video because I know that it's going to take a while to get through these books. So the first book on this stack of physical books is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I finally read this book this year, and I fully regret not having read it when I was much younger, like 11 or 12. I would have absolutely loved this book. It would have become my new personality. Actually, you know what? It wouldn't have even been a new personality. It would have just been like my personality. I would have just seen myself reflected in this book, and I would have absolutely loved it. But unfortunately, I waited until I was 27 to read this book, and I actually decided to pick it up because I kind of like re-entered my Anne with an E phase. I just absolutely love that show so much. I followed it from the very beginning, and I'm still so devastated that they didn't continue with it, that they didn't give it a season 4 that it deserved. And you know, I kind of just like re-entered that phase of my life where I'm like, I really want to watch Anne with an E, and then I went on to watch the Anne of Green Gables adaptation from PBS, and then I finally watched the 80s version of Anne of Green Gables and absolutely loved it. So it just felt natural and obvious to finally read the book, and oh my gosh, I love it so much. It was just so beautiful. There were so many amazing quotes from this book that I absolutely love, and I just love Anne so much. I love her as a character. I really relate to her. She's so intense about her emotions and a little quirky. She has some like different kind of interests. She's very smart, and I don't know, I absolutely love her, and I wish that I would have had her when I was like 11 or 12. The next book is one that I've been wanting to read for a while, but finally this year I got more into nonfiction, so I decided to pick it up, and that is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I absolutely loved this book. It made me cry so much, and this one mainly deals with grief, particularly where it pertains to her husband, and it just basically catalogs her life and her emotions and things that she was going through between the death of her husband and the year after that, and it was absolutely fantastic. It just blew me away. Like I said, I cried so much reading this book, and a lot of her experiences with grief really reminded me of when my grandpa passed away a few years ago, so I could really relate to it in that sort of sense. And yeah, I absolutely loved this book. I want to read so many more books by Joan Didion, and I know that she passed away recently within the past year or so, so I've been kind of like wanting to prioritize her books a little bit more because of that. So I highly recommend this one, but I will say that if your grief is maybe a little fresh, maybe don't pick this one up. But if you are somebody who has dealt with grief in their life, I mean, most of us have, I would highly recommend this book. Just know that it will make you cry. The The next book on this list is one of my favorite romances of the entire year, and I read this one actually while I was on the plane to and from New York, and that is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. And this is a sapphic romance, adult romance. I absolutely loved this book so much, and I was so pumped when I heard that Ashley Herring Blake was going to dip her toe into the adult romance genre, especially because I read one of her YA books years and years and years ago. It was probably like the second or third sapphic book I'd ever read, and I absolutely loved it. So I knew that I was going to love her adult romance, and I was not disappointed. It was so good. It was so funny, and mainly because of the main character Delilah. She is just so witty, and she has like this really dry sense of humor, and her interactions with her sister and her sister's friends were just so funny, and then the romance itself was just so amazing. I absolutely loved it. I wonder how many times I can say "so" in this video, but I absolutely loved this book. It was so much fun. I had such a good time reading it, and this is one of those romance books that was actually funny to me, and I would definitely classify it as a rom-com. Sometimes the rom-coms out there don't actually make me laugh, but this one definitely did, so I highly recommend it. It was such a good book, and just like one of those sapphic romances that is just so easy to get into, so easy to read, and this book kept me hooked the entire way through. The next book is another one of my favorite romances, but this time it's a historical romance, and it's a book that I actually read twice this year, and that is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. And yes, I know that I give this book 3.5 stars on Goodreads. Don't come for me, but I want to explain just a little bit. In good conscience, I don't think that I can rate any of Julia Quinn's books from the Bridgerton series more than 3 stars, more than 3.5 stars, for multiple reasons. A lot of them being some of the misogyny in the book, some of the classism in the book, some of the racism in the book, but I loved this one. I loved this one. This one has become like my entire personality. I love this book so much. Like I said, I've read it twice, and I felt like I just had to include it in this video despite it getting a 3.5 stars. I love this book. I love this book. It is like the definition of guilty pleasure for me. I can't express how much I love and appreciate this book. Of course, there are some things that I don't really love about this book. I will say that fat phobia plays a pretty big part in this book, in the plot, in the character of Penelope. But in my head, in my mind palace, when I read this book, no fat phobia. She is fat, she is wonderful, she's amazing, she never lost the weight. That's just what's in my head. And so maybe me putting it on this list is more like my interpretation of the book, the things that I took away from it, not necessarily the reality of the book. But I had to include this book. I absolutely love it. I love Penelope so much as a character. I really relate to her. She's the kind of character that's, you know, on the outside seems to play kind of second fiddle to her more popular, not necessarily popular, but just more important best friend. And it's so nice to get to see her get her story and have it be such a wonderful romance, in my personal opinion. I know that it's not everybody's favorite, but hey, this is my favorites video, and I love this book. The next book is one of the very few YA books that made it onto this list. I will say that I have moved away from reading YA so much more in the past few years, and this year way more than any other year. So it's very surprising that even like a couple of YA books made it onto this list, but I will say that these are super exceptional. And the first book is Iron Widow by Zirin J. Zhao. I loved this book, and even more surprisingly, it's a sci-fi book. I don't typically read sci-fi. As you know, if you've watched my videos in the past, you know how much I don't like sci-fi. Anything beyond Star Wars, too much sci-fi for me. However, this book really caught me off guard. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. I really appreciated the strong, unlikable female character in this book. I just thought that she was absolutely fantastic, so cutthroat and ruthless, and she really reminded me a lot of the main character in And I Darken, and also the main character in The Young Elites. I just love that kind of character. I love that kind of female character who is just unlikable, morally gray, even like morally bad in a way, and I just love it. I love it so much. I eat it up all the time, and this one, no exception. And also a little bit of polyamory in this book, which I absolutely love and I want more of in 2023. So if you have any recommendations for like really good, particularly fantasy books that involve polyamory, send them my way. I want to read them. Another amazing YA book, and that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. One of my favorite YA fantasies of the entire year. It was phenomenal. It was so well done. Another one of those like morally gray, unlikable female characters. I love those kind of characters. They're so good. They hit every single time, and more of them, please. Please give me more. But this book is a sort of retelling, reimagining of the fairy tale The Goose Girl, which I have read a few YA fantasies based on that premise, and this one I think might be my favorite. I think that Margaret Owen has a really good grasp on what makes YA fantasy so much fun to read, and she just does it in such a powerful way that is both accessible but also really goes into the depths of whatever she's exploring. And I really loved the way that Margaret Owen like dissected this main character and really got deep into what makes her tick, why she wants to be alone, why she feels so alone, why she feels like she has to do everything on her own. And I really appreciated that. I felt like I could really relate to this main character, and also there is some really great demisexuality rep in this book, which I highly appreciate and want more of. I think this video is going to be a lot of me saying, I want more of this, give me more of this. And yeah, that's definitely true with the demisexuality rep. There's also a sapphic ship in this book, which I really appreciated. So this book really has everything, something for everybody. And I don't hear enough great, amazing things about this book. I wish more people would read it because I feel like this could be everybody's new obsession. It is such a good fantasy book. The next book is an adult romance that I genuinely didn't think that I was going to love this much, and that is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. I loved this book. This one just hit me in a deeper spot than I thought it was going to hit me. Similarly to Beach Read, similarly to a lot of other Emily Henry books, this one almost had like a literary element to it. It felt a little bit more elevated compared to some other romance books that I have read this year. And I will say that like the shining perfection of this book comes from the prose. These two people can write their asses off. They have such a firm grasp on prose, on the English language. They just I don't know how they do it. They're performing some sort of magic with these words, because I would read like a paragraph or a page and just be like blown away and have to reread it just because it was so beautiful. And I love good prose. I love, like, even to go as far as to say I love purple prose. This isn't necessarily as far as purple prose, but it's somewhere in the middle, and I love it. It's so good. It's so well written. The romance was so beautifully developed. I wouldn't necessarily say it was like a second chance romance. I don't really know how you would categorize this book, but I just felt like the main characters, Katrina and Nathan, had such amazing chemistry, and you could tell right off the bat, like, these two meant for each other. These two are like soul mates, and I love that, because I have to say I'm currently reading a book where I'm just like, I can't see it. I can't see it. There's so many romance books out there where I feel like I don't get the chemistry between the two main characters, and I'm just kind of like, why am I reading this? But this one, it's obvious. It's so clear, and it's so deep, and it just hits you in like the center of yourself. I loved this book. and I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite romance books of the year. The next book is another one that hit me deep down in my soul, and that is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. And I kind of went through a journey with this book. I'm gonna say that. When I first bought it and picked it up, I thought, I'm gonna love this book. This book is gonna be one of my new favorite books. It's gonna be my personality. I'm gonna love it. And then I kept putting it off for some reason, and I started to get like videos and TikToks and posts and, you know, even articles kind of making me feel like, do I really want to read this? Is this gonna be up my alley? Is it gonna be a little too on the problematic side? I don't know. And, you know, there are definitely a lot of issues with this book. I will say that. I can link down below. I believe I did a reading vlog where I kind of talk a little bit more about those issues and about the specific article that was written about Ottessa Moshfegh and her proclivity to including a lot of intense fat phobia within her books, among a few other things. And I do think that it's an important read. I do highly recommend reading that article, and I do agree with a lot of the article, honestly. However, with that in mind, I did really enjoy this book. I thought it was really, really beautifully executed. I absolutely loved the writing in this book. It honestly just propelled me through this book. I have never read a book so fast. Every time I sat down to read this book, I would read like 60 pages within the blink of an eye, and I'd be like, how did I get here? How did this happen? And it was just so much fun to read. I just had such a good time reading it, even though it's not necessarily like a fun, cute little book, you know. It's definitely has like a deeper message and has some problematic elements to it, but I think that it just kind of rounds the book out in a way. It makes it so much more real. It makes it feel so much more rooted in reality in a way, because like the premise of this book is so outlandish, it's so weird, that you need some of those elements to root it into reality to make the main character feel real. And she's another one of those like unlikable, morally gray kind of main characters, which I love. The next book is one that I actually read pretty recently, and that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. I read this book in December. It was part of my December TBR, and it blew me away. It blew me away. It was so beautiful. Again, gorgeously written prose, just absolutely stunning. And there were so many amazing elements that I loved within this book, but particularly I really enjoyed the way that it talked about religion and the way that it talked about mythology and culture and how all of those things interact with each other. I talk about this more in one of my episodes of Vlogmas that I can link down below, but I really loved the conversation that it had about some of the negative effects of specifically Christianity on these smaller communities that have their own sort of mythology, and how the insertion of Christianity is usually not for the better. And I really enjoyed this. I can't wait to read the sequel. I think that it's going to be phenomenal. And all of the great things you've heard about this book are true. 100% pick it up. Stop putting it off like I did, and pick it up already. It's so, so good. The next book on this list is another one of those nonfiction books that really just hit me hard this year, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I listened to this as an audiobook, and Chanel does narrate it herself. I cried so much reading this book. It is such a heavy book. Definitely, if you're going to pick it up, bring the tissues because you will be needing them. It's so hard to talk about this book because it deals with such an intense and heavy sort of topic, and it's so upsetting because I recently saw on TikTok that the issues with Stanford and the way that they deal with sexual assault on their campus, horrific, absolutely abominable, just horrible. And I recently saw that they mishandled another case of sexual assault on their campus, and it's really upsetting. Like, don't send your kid to Stanford. Just don't do it. It's a horrible institution. They don't care about their students, especially if they're women. they just don't care. They don't bother with handling sexual assault on their campus. It's cold hard proof, unfortunately, and I want everybody to read this book. It is absolutely required reading. It's so tough to read, but it's so important. So yeah, I highly recommend this book. I highly recommend looking into Stanford and their horrible practices when it comes to dealing with sexual assault on their campus. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's not much else I can say. And the very last physical book that I have to talk about is another one of my favorite romance books of the year, and that is, of course, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I loved this book. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. I definitely would put it as like my second favorite Emily Henry book. Beach Read is obviously my first favorite. People We Meet on Vacation got knocked down to number 3. Book Lovers I absolutely enjoyed, and I finally have a physical copy which I get to read, I get to enjoy, and I finally have all of the Emily Henry romances in physical form. I have ascended to a higher plane because of this book. I love it. It was so fantastic. It's definitely one that I want to read again physically because I feel like I will get so much more out of it compared to the audiobook. I mean, I love the audiobook. It was really well done, but I want to read this physically mainly because I want to tab it, I want to annotate, so we'll see if I can get to that in 2023. But I absolutely loved this book. Another one of those kind of like unlikable female characters. I thought that Nora was absolutely fantastic. She was so funny, she was so dry, and I really loved the banter and the kind of relationship that she had with Charlie. I thought that they were really funny together. I thought they were really charming together, despite the way that they would kind of like bicker and nip at each other. I thought it was really cute. So I highly recommend this book as well. I mean, you don't need to hear it from me. You've heard it from everybody. We all love Book Lovers. Okay, so those were all the physical books, and I want to quickly go through the books that I don't own physically. I don't want to go in too much depth with them, but I mean, we gotta talk about them. So the first one is obviously Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. One of my favorite books of the year. I read this book in one sitting at night. I think I stayed up till like 3 a.m. reading this book, and I was hooked. I loved it so much. I really saw a lot of myself in both main characters of this book. I really appreciated it because it deals a lot with autistic representation, and it's been, you know, years for me to kind of like come to terms with the fact that like I'm definitely autistic, and this book was definitely something that helped a lot with that. And I really appreciate it. I really love it. It really hit me in such a deep spot, and I saw so much of myself in it. I really loved it. It's definitely my favorite Talia Hibbert book that I've read so far. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend it. And I mean, I recommend the entire Brown Sisters trilogy. They're all so good. The next book is actually a sequel to a series that I started in 2022, and that is Storm from the East by Joanna Hathaway. I absolutely love this book. It was fantastic, such a good sequel. There's really not much I can say about it because it is a sequel, but the first book is Dark of the West, which I also really enjoyed, but I think I liked the sequel a little bit better. It's kind of like historical fiction mixed with a little bit of Star Wars-y sci-fi. It's such a different kind of historical fantasy YA. It's something like I've never read before, so I highly recommend this series. The next book is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers, which I really loved. I thought it was such a fantastic book. It was another one of those books that really made me feel something. It made me cry, and it hit me deeper than I thought it was going to hit me, if I'm being honest. I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention a Sylvia Moreno Garcia book, and my favorite one from 2022 was Gods of Jaden's Shadow. I loved this book, and this one is another one that took me by surprise. I really didn't think that I was going to love this book as much as I did, but oh my gosh, it was absolutely phenomenal. Probably one of my favorite Sylvia Moreno Garcia books, if I'm being honest. It was so good. The next book is one of the first celebrity memoirs that I read of 2022, and that is Andre Leon Talley's The Chiffon Trenches. And I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was phenomenal. I listened to the audiobook where he narrates it, and he did such a fantastic job. Unfortunately, he did recently pass away, like about a year ago, and he was honestly a pretty big part of like my preteen slash teenage years, mainly because of how much I was into fashion at the time. So I felt like it was only fitting to read his memoir. I just realized I forgot about one of my literal favorite physical books that I read this year, and that is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. How did I forget about this book? How did I forget to put this in my book stack? What happened? Because this is literally probably my favorite book of the year. I'm gonna say it, it's probably my favorite book of the year. I loved this book so much, and it's one of the Sally Rooney books that I thought that I wasn't really gonna love, because it is told semi-epistolary, because some of the sections of this book are told through email. So I was a little like, am I gonna like this? I don't really know. Because with Sally Rooney, at that point, I was pretty 50-50. I didn't really like Conversations with Friends, and then I really loved Normal People. So it was really a toss-up whether I was going to like this book or not. But this one ended up being literally my favorite Sally Rooney book of all time at this point. I love this book. I love it. It made me a Sally Rooney stan. It made me want to defend her for the rest of my life. I love this book so much. There are so many quotes from this book that have stuck with me that I absolutely love. If you're gonna read a Sally Rooney book, make it this one. It is phenomenal. The next book that I absolutely loved was By the Book by Jasmine Guillory, and this is part of the Meant to Be series that Disney is doing. It's kind of like they're taking these romance authors and having them write retellings of their Disney princess movies. And this one is based on Beauty and the Beast, and you can read the series out of order. They're not connected. They're all written by different authors. This one I absolutely loved. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and part of it, or I guess most of it actually, is set in Santa Barbara, which is my hometown. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara. I absolutely loved it. So it was really interesting to get to see Jasmine Guillory's take on what Santa Barbara is. Some of it wasn't very accurate at all, but I did really enjoy getting to see it, and it was really fun to see my hometown being spotlighted in a book. But overall, I really loved the romance in it, and it was actually my first Jasmine Guillory book that I've ever read. The next book is one that hit me way harder than I thought it was going to hit me, and that is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This one deals a lot with the AIDS crisis of like the 80s and 90s, so definitely trigger warnings for that, but I really appreciated this book. It was so beautifully written. It was so just like, it got me so deep down in my chest. I felt it the entire time I was reading this book, and by the end I was just like fully in tears. It's such a good book. Another book that I would be fully remiss if I didn't mention, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Such a fantastic book, such a wonderful celebrity memoir. She did such a fantastic job really condensing so much of her life into this one book. I will say massive trigger warnings for eating disorders. I personally have dealt with that kind of thing in the past, and I found it a little difficult to read this book at times and a little bit triggering at times. So I will say definitely have that in mind before going into the book. I kind of knew before I went into the book that that was definitely going to play a big role, but I didn't realize the way that it would affect me. So just keep that in mind. Just know that it's a little bit intense, but I really love this book anyway. I mean, Jennette McCurdy was one of my favorite parts of iCarly when I was growing up. So I really appreciate and respect the fact that she took the time to write this book and get all of it down on paper. I thought it was fantastic. Another one of my favorite adult romances of the year was Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. Loved this book, so fantastic. Such a good romance about a character over 30. So if you're looking for that kind of book, definitely pick this one up. It's very short, it's very sweet, and I really love the romance in this one. And also the kids in this book were adorable. They were so well written. They really felt like actual kids, and that's an issue that I have with a lot of adult books, is that so many adult authors have no idea how to write a child. No clue. They don't know how a child thinks or a child speaks, and it's like, have you ever met a child in your life? But this one, it was very clear. Annabelle Monaghan has met a child before. Another one of my favorite books of the year. I really went through a little bit of a phase of reading these kind of books, and that is The Push by Ashley Audren. And I loved this book so much. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. It was iconic. I really, like I said, I went through a phase of reading books where there is like kind of like, I don't know if I'd go demon child. We'll say demon child, and a mother who is at her wit's end. I have read, I guess not so many books with that premise. I really only read 2, but I want to read more. And I read The Push and I read Baby Teeth, and I think that The Push might have been my favorite over Baby Teeth. I mean, I loved Baby Teeth, don't get me wrong, it was such a good book, but I think The Push was just slightly better. Slightly better. Another amazing celebrity memoir from this year was Mean Baby by Selma Blair. Oh my god. Oh my gosh, it was fantastic. I actually think I might have liked that one the most out of the celebrity memoirs that I read. I had never really known a lot about Selma Blair, honestly. I knew that she was in a few of my favorite movies. I love Cruel Intentions, I love Legally Blonde, but beyond that, I didn't really know a lot about her, so this was a lot of new information. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of I'm Glad My Mom Died, but grown up. You know, it's almost like if Jeanette McCurdy had taken like 20 more years to write the book, Mean Baby would have been the book that she would write. It was fantastic. It was so moving. It was so beautiful. I listened to it as an audiobook, and Selma Blair narrates it, and there were so many parts of the audiobook where you can tell that the emotions were really getting to her, and she starts to get really emotional and teary, and it hit me so deeply. And her relationship with her mom reminds me of so many relationships that I have with people, and I loved it. It was fantastic, and it's one that is so underrated. I feel like nobody is talking about this book, and so many people would absolutely love it. So take this as your sign to pick up Mean Baby by Selma Blair. And the very last book that I want to talk about is another physical book that I completely forgot to add to my physical stack. Probably my second favorite book of the year, and that is Autumn by Ali Smith. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, this book was phenomenal. I annotated the absolute living hell out of this book, as you can see. So many annotations, and I loved it. It was fantastic. The prose in this was absolutely beautiful. It's kind of written in that same sort of way as like a Sally Rooney book where there's no quotation marks, so definitely know that before going in. Also, this book is part of a seasonal series. It starts with autumn, then it goes winter, spring, and summer. And you can, I think you can start wherever you want within the series, but this one is the first book. And yeah, I loved it so much. It was so beautiful. It was so moving. I'm so glad that I picked it up during autumn. It fits so perfectly, and I loved it. It was fantastic. It's one that I don't even know how to describe it or how to pitch it, but if you love beautiful prose, if you love like a very moving story that doesn't have really anything to do with romance, it's really just about characters and people and humans and life, just pick it up. It's so good. Alright, so those are all of my favorite books of 2022. This video was probably super long, but I had so many amazing reads this year that it was just so hard to cut any of them out or decide not to mention them. I wanted to mention all of them. So I hope you all enjoyed this video, and be sure to let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorite books of 2022 were. I really want to know. And if you did enjoy this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links will be down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye! Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you.